Seja bem-vindo e bem-vinda ao BetaFutures, onde os futuros são amplificados pelas tecnologias. Eu sou Marcel Nobre e esse é o espaço onde a criatividade humana se encontra com a inteligência artificial para explorar os horizontes do possível. Aqui, em cada episódio, teremos a oportunidade de mergulhar mais profundamente para entender os impactos das tecnologias, em especial da inteligência artificial, em diversos aspectos da vida e dos negócios. Prepare-se para uma experiência única e inovadora. Esse é o BetaFutures e o futuro está apenas começando. Olá, seja bem-vindo, seja bem-vinda ao segundo episódio do BetaFutures, Futuros Amplificados pela Tecnologia. E no episódio de hoje nós vamos investigar mais a fundo como a inteligência artificial está moldando e impactando o futuro do trabalho. Desde o início da civilização moderna, toda nova tecnologia sempre trouxe consigo uma certa ansiedade ou um certo medo das pessoas de perderem seus empregos, mas historicamente a tecnologia cria muito mais oportunidades do que elimina empregos. Se por um lado ela acaba substituindo atividades ou tarefas que seres humanos cumpririam, ela cria novos empregos e novas funções que antes não existiam. E essa conta historicamente fecha no positivo. Porém, não sejamos tão românticos assim. É pela primeira vez o ser humano experimenta uma tecnologia como a inteligência artificial que é tão poderosa, que cresce de forma extremamente veloz, de forma exponencial numa escala global. Portanto, sem romantizar, pode ser sim que você perca um emprego por uma inteligência artificial ou ao menos para alguém que saiba utilizar a inteligência artificial. Todos nós precisaremos passar por um upskilling ou por um reskilling urgente e nos adaptarmos e nos prepararmos para adotar essa nova tecnologia que promete exponencializar as nossas capacidades humanas. Como será o futuro do trabalho com esse impacto profundo que a inteligência artificial está causando? Seremos dominados por agentes autônomos? Existirão empresas que valem $1 bilhão com apenas um funcionário? Será que é só colocar tecnologia e tá tudo bem? Será que precisamos repensar as estruturas organizacionais, inclusive o nosso modelo mental de trabalho, para investigar melhor os impactos da inteligência artificial for future of work? I spoke with Ian Beacraft during South by Southwest 2024, which took place in Austin, Texas. Ian, in addition to being a futurist, is one of the leading speakers on the topic in the world, having been one of the main speakers at South by Southwest 2024. E além disso, ele é CEO da Signal and Cipher.
I am the only human on this set. They are not real.
In the near future, your colleagues will interact with an AI representation of you, and you'll interact with AI as a colleague and potentially a boss. Re-engineering the concept of a design sprint with a Big Four consulting firm, all with generative AI at the forefront, and approaching every new project with a focus on the future arc of the workplace.
In a world where machines have become creative and we design by algorithm, there's only one thing to save the human race. Blow up.
Or you could just watch this session. I'm sure that's a much less violent way to do it.
In your perspective, Ian, what would be the ideal balance between work performed by humans and work performed by AI systems in the coming years? Are there functions that you believe should remain exclusively human, and for what reasons?
Gotcha. So as far as dividing labor between humans and AI, I think that there's going to be a lot that happens between now and when we're being very clear about what is exclusively the domain of machine-based work and human-based work. And I think one of the challenges is that right now it feels like the machines are coming for our jobs because they can do very specific pieces of our jobs very, very well. And it gets back to the concept that I talked about in my keynote yesterday, that it's really the functions of how our organizations are designed that are actually more problematic than the idea of machines creating issues for us. So when we talk about the future of work, many people think, well, the artificial intelligence is going to make me irrelevant because it can do my job. Mm-hmm. And it's not that easy. One, AI likely can't do your job. It likely can do parts of your job. And even right now, it can do parts of those parts very well, but not the complete thing. Like anybody who's spent time with ChatGPT or any of the other AI applications knows some things are mind-blowingly good, and others are just curiously awful at how it can accomplish those things. And it will get better and better and better and better. And I think that's what makes people nervous. They know, okay, this is just the start, but it's going to get better over time.
A coisa que eu acho que vai mudar a perspectiva sobre a economia, a produção de trabalho e como as pessoas se relacionam com seus empregos é uma mudança fundamental na forma como projetamos o trabalho e com cada grande revolução tecnológica redesenhamos o trabalho. Quando a revolução industrial surgiu e nos afastamos de coisas como vapor para carvão,
Coal to electricity, we were also moving people away from doing physical labor and putting them into management jobs. Saying, you've done this job exclusively very, very well for a long time. Obviously, you can bring a team. Let's get you managing. And they're thinking about theory. They're thinking about process. They're thinking about refining product. And that abstraction, taking them away from doing the work, puts them in a place where they can orchestrate the work. And that's been a trend we've seen for 130 years. And we're moving more towards a world where you'll be orchestrating the work than doing the work. And that's a challenge. People see themselves as doing the work. And when we realize, okay, we can orchestrate work now, that is going to unlock a lot of potential and power for people. Whereas I might be an individual, but with AI, I'm an army. Mm-hmm. I have a whole team. I have eventually a whole company that works for me. And it's hard for people to see that right now. But at Signal and Cypher, we're working at building multi-agentic systems. So we have bots that will spin up other bots based on the task at hand. So I'll give one bot, which is essentially the master controller, and that is what I get the assignment to. It'll spin up 4, 5, 6, 7, sometimes 100 other bots, depending on what needs to be done to make that happen, and pass them amongst each other. Just like if I got a whole bunch of people in this room and said, okay, here's what we're going to do today. Everybody listen up. I need you to do this, and you to do this. Now you two are managing. Go find out who else here needs to be engaged in getting this done to make it happen. I'm going to go and take care of this other thing. Let me know when you're done. Like that visual helps you understand how our work with bots is going to work out. Now, the challenge with that is, well, if we just deploy that, in our current organizations, that means you can do more work with fewer people. That's a good thing, but that's also frightening if my job is on the chopping block. And that brings us to the second fundamental issue with the way work is designed. And it's because we think about jobs and job holders. We think about, I am the financial analyst in the accounting department, and when my job is fixed like that, I'm only allowed to do these functions in the organization. If one piece of that function is automated, I'm scared because I know other pieces are next.
Mas se eu conseguir trazer mais de mim mesmo porque estou aumentado pela IA e posso desempenhar outras funções que não fazem parte do meu trabalho típico em um nível suficientemente alto, então posso agregar mais valor à minha organização.
And they don't have to hire as many people to grow, means they can grow faster with fewer resources. And a small team has more impact, not less. So I think that there are going to be some fundamental changes in the way we design work, in the way we design organizations, and in the way that we interface with machines to get things done collaboratively versus the adversarial route of, you're coming to replace me.
Beyond task automation, what transformative impact do you foresee AI having on human creativity and innovation in work process? How can we design AI systems to amplify human creative potential instead of merely replacing labor?
Mm-hmm. So this whole process mirrors the previous revolutions we've been through. Every time there's a new technology, we always think it's going to replace something that we do that is instinctually human. And it replaces a function of it, but it also augments so many others. One of the things I was talking about yesterday was that actually, let me rephrase it because I lost that track of thought. But so this is a common track that happens when we go through a revolution in technology, and most people think that when they see something new, it's going to replace something that they do. We've been through these revolutions so far, even with the digitization. Let's take editors, for example. When cinematography and digital cinematography came out, we thought, okay, this is the end of editing. Well, it's not. It's the end of splicing negatives together by hand. And we didn't just send those people off to a bread line saying, you're never going to work again. It's impossible. Your right to work has been revoked. And that's this message that we have in our heads of like, you're replacing a piece of my work, you're replacing a piece of my soul, a piece of my creativity. But what happened is for those people is linear editing and nonlinear editing became a thing digitally. And their skill sets were so applicable cross-pollinatable to a new system that they were the people they hired to do this new work, And when we talk about creativity specifically, one of the challenges that we have with the story around creativity is we are seeing the ability of people with no artistic skill to come in and create things that look really, way beyond their skill set. And to those people who have spent decades of their lives devoted to a craft and refining that craft and building a style, to see this whole mob of people entering the conversation who have no respect for the craft in their mind, have not earned the rights to be a part of that conversation, haven't put in the years of sweat, and are also taking away value from them. As an artist, I would be nervous too. In that position, they have a right to be angry about some of the way things are happening. I come from a family of artists. I was a musician for 20 years. I understand that craft and that art, and to see someone else walk in and say, I can do the same thing you can, and have done none of the work, that's infuriating. Absolutely infuriating. But what is going to happen over time is AI doesn't replace creativity. It will augment creativity. We're just in the beta stage of this technology right now. So it has a very narrow function of what it can do. And we're overhyping the potential of that narrow slice of that technology. But when we start to see the broader horizons of what is possible with this, all of a sudden we can appreciate, this doesn't constrain the amount of demand or supply for a very narrow slice of creativity. It opens up entirely new pastures for creativity. And I'll give an example. 2 years ago, all the hype was in the metaverse.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, that went away, and that word was like banished.
Você diz metaverso e as pessoas pensam, ele está obcecado pelo metaverso. Bem, honestamente, o metaverso está de volta e melhor do que nunca, precisamente devido aos desenvolvimentos em IA generativa, e o Apple Vision Pro está tornando isso legal novamente. E de volta em 2020, estávamos prometendo esses mundos imersivos, onde as pessoas poderiam passar tempo e que seriam revolucionários. E na verdade, tudo o que conseguimos foram um monte de corredores vazios com avatares dançando em supercuts.
And nobody wants to spend time weeks at a time in an environment like that. Little bits and pieces is fine. You can have a cool event there if it's well structured. But what is happening now is the technology to build a world on command, to design artifacts and attributes of these worlds on command by scanning something on your phone or using text to 3D is developing right in front of our eyes. So the building blocks to create in a completely new medium are becoming available to all of us at the same time. And that's never happened before. Usually a new domain is only available to the highly technical at the very beginning, to people who are immersed in the state of that art or very artistically inclined in a specific space or highly technical. We are all being ushered into this immersive space at the same time together now, because I can prompt it with my keyboard and build it and develop it. I can scan it with my phone that everybody has. So we're going to see a really amazing emergence of this immersive technology as a collective technology, because everyone has the ability to participate without having to have incredible amounts of knowledge. When people realize that has happened, I think our narrative of, well, everyone can do it and it's not an advantage for anybody, or it's coming to take our jobs, take a look at the new horizons and how we can collectively build those together and how creativity could be celebrated in different ways. And it's not being gatekept. It's not like, oh, you're not visually creative, so you're not welcome here, or you're not technically creative. All forms of creativity can manifest in these spaces now. And I think when we start to see that take hold, people will look at that, breathe a sigh of relief and say, that's the future. And it's not just immersive technology. It will happen over and over in different domains.
That was prompted music. And we are living in a synthetic media reality. We're living in a reality where so much of what we do, hear, see, and experience now is generated by machines, thankfully, mostly prompted by humans right now, but more and more of that is going to change. And that is going to change the way that we do the work of the future. But in a few years, AI is just going to be assumed. We're going to talk about it the same way that we do digital. How many of us talk about digital today as an advantage, the thing you need to be paying attention to? And we're in a world where things are moving so incredibly fast. Just a few weeks ago, we had the release of 3 incredible models all on one day. We had Sora, which blew everybody's minds, and then we had the release of Gemini 1.5, and also VJEPA, which got almost no love, unfortunately, but that was a meta model that was about vision. And all of that happened on the same day, on a Tuesday. By the year 2050, we will be experiencing 100 years of progress at the current rate of progress today. So in the year 2024, the rate of progress that I just talked about a moment ago of a typical Tuesday, 100 years of that type of progress every 5 years. That's gonna be wild.
So when it comes to how we upskill people in the future, there's a few things. One is, I do believe that there will be an elimination of certain jobs. I think that will take more time than people think. In some cases, it'll be almost instant. Like customer service is an area where I think that's going to be impacted very, very, very quickly. But there are others where I think it'll take more time because it's more complex than people realize. I think we're going to have a self-driving car moment for some of these jobs where people think, oh, we'll have self-driving cars in 5 years. And then we realize, oh, it's a lot more complicated than that. Same thing is going to happen with replacing humans in certain jobs. They're going to realize, oh, I can't just actually pull humans out of the equation. I have to support them and create this infrastructure around them. And maybe I can have fewer people doing that, but I can't eliminate everybody. And that process takes time too. So there's some hope around that. I think that will also create a dialogue between people and management that will help shape how people are integrated in the organization. But regardless how that plays out, we still have to figure out how we prepare people for the jobs of the future. And that has to happen in a number of ways. Education has to change rapidly. And everyone I know that is in the sector of education that's in this space is very aware of that. You can't take a look at educators right now and say, you don't know what's going on. They know what's going on. And many of them have really great ideas for how to resolve it. They're grappling with the same things that all of us are, is how do we build structure in the organization to make that something you can diffuse to society and scalable.
Então, eu acho que os educadores vão ter que ser uma parte fundamental disso, mas também precisam ter habilidades superiores nesse aspecto e saber como viver e respirar isso.
Their jobs are being affected. And the other is going to be major initiatives. I think that the Singapore government has kind of put up a red flag around that with the SG Futures. I literally stood up out of my seat and like pumped my fist in the air when I saw that speech, because that is a symbol of effective leadership.
On artificial intelligence, less than 2 weeks ago, just before Budget 2024, the announcement by DPM Lawrence Wong, our finance minister, there was another announcement halfway across the world from Singapore. A tech company which is already changing the world, a tech company called OpenAI, which brought you ChatGPT not too long ago. That company announced a new platform, a new AI platform called Sora. Sora allows you to key in text, type in some text, a prompt, and it can produce videos which are indistinguishable from what Hollywood can produce today and what smaller studios can produce. Just 1 year ago, during the debate on the President's address in April 2023, I'd spoken in Parliament about the age of AI and how fast things were changing, how software like ChatGPT, GPT-4, Midjourney 5 had appeared on the market within less than a year or so. AI which can hold a conversation with you, can write an essay for you, that's ChatGPT. AI which can take high school exams, advanced placement exams in the United States curriculum, and outperform many humans, that's GPT-4. So that's the world today. Technology disruption happening very quickly. New challenges everywhere. The unexpected, increasingly the norm. And so we can't hide from these changes. No country, no economy can hide from these changes in the world with AI. Even if an entire country tries to prevent AI from entering its borders, other economies will do so. Your competitors will do so. So we have to accept the world as it is, the way the world is going to be, and look after, support, empower, uplift our people. And this is why the new subsidy for Singaporeans aged 40 and above to pursue another full-time diploma in higher education. This new subsidy in the budget, that's why it's so important, because it recognizes that in a world that's changing so quickly, what you learn in school, in education at age 20, may have changed, transformed, been replaced by a new world by the time you're age 40.
Reconhece que a mudança é necessária e apoia trabalhadores de meia idade e trabalhadores mais velhos. E ter trabalhadores de meia idade aprendendo novas habilidades ao lado de trabalhadores mais jovens, um trabalhador de meia idade em meio à carreira, ao lado de alguém que tem 18, 19, 20 anos ou mais, aprendendo juntos, também transformará a experiência educacional em nossos institutos de ensino superior, porque os trabalhadores mais velhos trazem experiência de vida, habilidades de vida e sabedoria vivida para a sala de aula. Mesmo ao trazer isso para a sala de aula, eles também aprendem novas habilidades, junto com os estudantes mais jovens, e esses estudantes, ao trabalharem uns com os outros, acabam se apoiando mutuamente. Isso transformará a sala de aula, mesmo enquanto permite que os trabalhadores mais velhos e os trabalhadores mais jovens formem novas amizades, novas redes e novas oportunidades juntos.
And it will change the game for them. The problem is, not everyone has the resources that Singapore does. Not every government is going to be able to provide those types of resources for the people. Not everyone can rely on their government to provide those types of things, and those systems don't exist. So where do we look? And there are always two options for that. One, the organizations that want to keep their employees, their most valuable employees, are going to have to participate in educating and upskilling them. Now, some companies are going to be looking at this as a great way of saying efficiencies. I'm going to look at my market, I'm going to see what the stockholders want, and I'm going to cut a bunch of people because that gets us a real big boost these days. Efficiency means stock price go up. And the companies that react like that are cutting their lifespan by decades. Mm-hmm. I firmly believe that that is the most ineffective and ignorant way to go about making change, because it's based on an old paradigm that the stockholder is what should be guiding value. Stockholders are still important, don't get me wrong, but we're moving into a new paradigm where the old ways of looking at things don't work anymore. So you can't just say, I'm going to pull the biggest lever I can. What we do need to be doing is understanding the world around all of us is changing, manager or not, and help people understand that the future of your role could look like this. Here's what we're thinking about in terms of changing the department. And I would actually recommend an approach. Accenture recently did this, where they had an open letter from their head of HR. It said, we want to work together with you. We understand that the future of this company, of this industry, and of the world relies on a mix of automation, AI, and human beings. We are keenly focused on the progress of that future, and we want to build it together. So what I invite you to do is come work with us and help us figure out what parts of your role should be automated, shouldn't be automated, and how to automate them. And we'll co-create a space together of what that new role looks like, and understand that when we do this process, we'll find ways to expand the ultimate impact that humans may have here. Because if you, and that was the impetus of the letter, I thought it was beautifully executed, because it creates a dialogue between the people who are doing the work and the people who want to manage the work. It's not about how can we eliminate you, it's how can we work this together. And I think that when people spend time dissecting their work, which is a big part of what we do, we take a look at the role, we take a look at the work, and we figure out what does that look like, what parts of it can be automated, what parts of it can be augmented with AI, and then what is distinctly human. And when you kind of atomize everything, we do the same thing with the job itself, with the role, with the work that people are doing. Everything from the brainstorm to a design sprint, break it down to its most atomic components, the most basic units. And all of a sudden you can rearrange these things in new ways that say, this structure looks different here. This structure looks like this over here. And when people see what those structures could look like, it's not, they don't see like bits and pieces of their life being pulled apart and eliminated. What they see is these new constellations create new value in different ways. And then they can picture themselves in that role. And they can see what that looks like and how they can have impact. So when it comes to reskilling people, it's not just about how do I teach you to use ChatGPT? How do I teach you to use this new technology? It's how do I help you become a part of the conversation about redesigning the work that you're going to do? Because it's either going to be redesigned around you or redesigned with you. So governments aren't probably providing that support. But as a company level, you need to be inviting your people in and say, hey, we've all been talking about it. We might not have been talking about it openly internally, but I know all of you are talking about it to each other. We're talking about it to each other. Let's get together and figure this out. Not every company is going to be able to do that as a collaborative way. The culture may not be there, but you have to work towards creating a culture where you can and not have your employees feel and fear that they're only doing that so they can automate me and push me out. Because if they don't trust you, then they won't work with you in that way. But if they do, you can create a company where the employees have more equity in how that company is built, how it's designed, how their work shapes up. And by doing these exercises, you not only know how your work looks, you get to spend time with the technology to understand how it impacts your job. And time spent is probably the most important factor with understanding how these technologies work for you, what they can do and what they can't, because we know that they do certain things exceptionally well, others very poorly, and it's not a linear connection between the two. You can't say, just because it does this, I know it does this. You have to spend time realizing this works, this does not. So individual time spent, collaborative work with your organizations to say, we realize, like, we're all into this together. If as employees, we decide we're going to ice management out and say, no, we don't want any part of that, you're already gone. You've opted out of that future economy. You may not see it eye to eye, but you have to find a way there fast, because that is going to shape your job. That is going to shape what type of training that you need. This is something we have to co-author together. It is not something that management gets to dictate because they're going to get it wrong. It's not something that the employees get to mutiny about because they're gone after that. So like, we have to come together to figure out how we do this as a group.
But one of the challenges that we encounter when we're trying to make these changes are that the mental models of yesterday are starting to collide with the technologies of tomorrow. Rashad Tabakawala says that the future does not fit the containers of the past. It's beautiful. I love that, because it's so true, and yet every time we encounter a new technology, we always treat it with the same frameworks that we did from what we know.
De acordo com o Fórum Econômico Mundial, a inteligência artificial vai eliminar até 85 milhões de empregos até 2029. E olhando só para essa fotografia, parece algo bastante alarmante, e isso vem de muita notícia, vem de muita audiência. Mas a verdade é que o próprio Fórum Econômico Mundial estima que até 2029 a IA também vai criar 97 milhões de novas oportunidades de trabalho. Ou seja, serão 12 milhões de empregos a mais do que anteriormente. O grande ponto aqui é que, se por um lado essas 85 milhões de pessoas não estão preparadas para assumir esses 97 milhões de novas possibilidades, quem que vai preparar essas pessoas para que elas possam se profissionalizar, adquirir essas novas habilidades, esses novos conhecimentos para assumir essas 97 milhões de possibilidades? Porque senão, de um lado teremos 85 milhões de desempregados e do outro lado teremos 97 milhões de vagas não ocupadas, o que vai atrasar um pouco o desenvolvimento dessa tecnologia. Agora, se esperarmos que os governos ou as escolas façam esse papel, possivelmente esse processo vai demorar muito e a gente vai ter um problema social muito grande e esse gap ainda vai aumentar mais. Mas quem vai fazer esse papel? São universidades? Ou será que a gente tem que repensar o papel das empresas no processo de desenvolvimento das pessoas, mesmo quando elas não são colaboradores dessas empresas? Porque se as empresas quiserem ter os melhores talentos e ocuparem essas novas vagas, talvez elas terão que criar, além da sua unidade principal de negócio, talvez escolas corporativas para preparar pessoas para participarem dos seus processos seletivos. Logicamente que às vezes o caminho mais óbvio é demitir essas pessoas e buscar gente preparada no mercado. Mas se hoje, em pleno 2024, quando eu estou gravando esse episódio aqui, já existe uma grande dificuldade de encontrar pessoas preparadas no mercado, imagine no momento em que exigir um conhecimento muito maior e novas habilidades para lidar com a inteligência artificial. Então talvez o ponto principal sejam as empresas já começarem a mapear quais são as atividades ou as funções que serão mais facilmente substituídas por inteligência artificial e já preparar essas pessoas para assumirem essas novas posições. É obviamente que esse não é algo tão simples de fazer no curto prazo, mas se as pessoas e as empresas não pensarem de forma conjunta em como resolver essa solução, nós teremos dois problemas ali para frente. Fato é que todos nós precisaremos de um upskilling ou de um reskilling e vamos ter que nos atualizar as nossas habilidades, os nossos conhecimentos e a forma como a gente lida com o trabalho. Então, por um lado, os colaboradores vão precisar ser protagonistas nessa jornada de autodesenvolvimento, de um aprendizado autodirigido, para buscarem o seu desenvolvimento para lidar com essa nova tecnologia. E do outro, as empresas vão ter que virar também empresas de educação, não só para preparar os seus colaboradores para ocuparem essas novas posições, como para educar o próprio mercado em como utilizar os seus produtos ou serviços, ou inclusive antes mesmo das pessoas serem candidatos a trabalharem nas suas empresas. Esse é um grande desafio que as empresas vão ter daqui para frente.
But I personally believe that this is the era of the creative generalist. And the creative generalist is somebody who isn't just an expert in one domain. They're not just a specialist. We grew up in an era that said, go to school, get a degree, get really good at something, and then build expertise in that particular domain to the point where you can become promotable and have a defensible place in the workforce.
Can you share insights about the most recent and innovative project at Cypher that align with future trends in work and AI? How is your company helping to shape this future?
Absolutely. So as far as the tool sets we've been building, we've been focused on how do we take traditional business processes and activities and redesign them from first principles and then add technology to them. A lot of people look at what we do and say, oh, you're an AI company. And in some cases, yes, some cases, no. We're about system design and change management. So if you were to take a look at what we do, it's more futures and foresight based on building a vision for what your company can be. And we try to course towards that vision. And then we take a look internally at how you're structured. How is the work you do getting you towards that vision or not? And then we pick one core piece of that, we break it down. I talked about atomizing and deconstructing. And we figure out what's a part of that future, what's not, what can be automated, what's not. And we've done that for several different processes, the design sprint and the brainstorm. And what we've done as a result of that is we're able to do
ordens de magnitude a mais em volume, explorar mais do espaço do problema e encurtar drasticamente o prazo.
An example of that process, we did this in partnership with BCG last year, where we did a small brainstorm that had the impact of a full design sprint. A design sprint typically taking 5 days, and we actually even went far beyond that, this taking an afternoon. So we brought 12 innovation leaders into the office in Atlanta and said, okay, we're going to bring you together, and none of you have been prepared for this at all today. You don't need to use any of the technology, but we're going to have a brainstorm about the future of the movie industry, because everybody knows how movies are made. And we essentially spent the afternoon brainstorming about that, visualizing it, bringing it to life. And what we had built was a custom tech stack that allows us to essentially visualize things in real time. So as people are having that brainstorm, you have an idea that's brilliant. Okay, we visualized it, and you can see it in front of your eyes within minutes. Now it's actually seconds. But the visualization changes the element of brainstorming, because as I see what I'm talking about visualized, now I have a new feedback loop. I can start to see, how does that change my perspective? Oh, now that I see it that way, what does it mean to do this? Or we can do this. So you start asking new questions. You start finding new avenues of inquiry. And that means you make different decisions, more educated, more refined, more nuanced decisions. So something that would have been more nuanced, it would have taken weeks to do, we're doing in hours. And over time, we're building up this visual of everything that's been put together. It's kind of like those sketch notes and whiteboarding, but it's on steroids. And by the end, we have these vignettes, these stories of all these different things that came to life that can travel with you as you go outside the room. And that was the insight around this. Was the problem with the brainstorm is, there's several things that people do wrong with brainstorms. And I talked about first principles. So we brought it back and said, if we were to build this from scratch from the very start, as if we knew nothing about brainstorms, we were going to build the perfect one, what would that look like? So we looked at the problems. We said, first of all, there are far too few ideas. All the research says you need thousands of ideas to come up with something that's commercially viable, not dozens. Mm-hmm. So we looked at that. We typically align towards an idea too fast. So we all say, oh, that's a great one. Let's build on top of that, instead of like putting it all out there and assessing the landscape. We also do it with human bias involved. Like, we are terrible predictors of what's going to work and what's not. So we make decisions before we have data. So we figured out, how do we get that to be a part of the decision-making process? And then beyond that, when you leave the room, the ideas tend to die, because the people who were in the brainstorm all have the context of what happened. How did it come together? What's the energy behind this pitch? And most people outside the room just get a picture of all the sticky notes that were on the whiteboard. Like, we had this idea and a couple of like bullet points on paper in an email. So we figured that's a problem. How do we fix that? And the final one is no executive participation, because brainstorms and design sprints are time expensive. And an executive usually won't sit in a brainstorm because their time is best spent elsewhere. They want a group of experts to come with an idea and then come to them. And that can be problematic because you don't have executive support for something until you've proven it's going to be viable. But if you can invite them to be part of the conversation, all of a sudden, they see how it's coming together and they can put their weight behind moving these things forward, and all of a sudden they start to happen. So the way we built this is we built the design around that visualization engine, and we built it at scale and at depth. So we were able to take ideas that people had and multiply them using AI by putting them through different frameworks. So we do recombinatory play. So we take an idea and we pair it with another thing that's wildly unrelated, and then turn that over a dozen times, and people would react to that. We take an idea, we put it through Porter's 5 forces, we put it through different foresight frameworks. So now you have a team that kind of maxed out at 45 or 50 ideas and said, oh man, I'm done. And we turn that into thousands. And all of a sudden, that surface area of what you can look at is wildly different. And that's one of the beautiful things about AI, is it allows you in a very short period of time to widen your aperture and say, instead of taking a look at this small piece of the problem, I can take a look at this piece of the problem before we make a decision. And all of a sudden, your ideas and your decisions are more nuanced, they're more robust, they're more defensible, they're data-driven. So as we built that process out, we built the visualization engine, and then we had the idea to get scale, but also depth. So let's say we land on something where we're thinking, that's an amazing idea, let's dig into it. We did this recently with a group of banking clients, and there was an insight around the psychology of behavioral economics and how that could impact good saving decisions and financial wellness. And one of them was about this idea of being able to talk to your future self. Like, what if you could actually talk to the person that you want to be and visualize that strongly? How could that change your financial behaviors in the present? So we used AI to actually research the scientific literature behind that element of science. And we went through all these different papers. We were able to summarize, dissect, find the connected papers that prove out or disprove out that hypothesis. And we were lucky because it ended up proving that hypothesis. The data and the science behind it said unequivocally, if you were able to very vividly imagine your future self and immerse yourself in that person and then build empathy for that person, then it will change the things that you do today. Now, if you're not able to do that, here's the reasons why it wouldn't work. So we just basically took user research that would have taken weeks and we compressed it into that time frame to make a decision. Now we can focus our user research elsewhere on different problems for the same thing. So we built a prototype for it where I would, let's say I'm Amy, a college student who wants to take my parents on their European trip for their 50th wedding anniversary. And I need to save up for like 5 or 6 years to do that. And this Amy basically, takes a picture of herself. She uses generative AI to age herself to that date of when she's going to be, and then tells the machine, what do I want to do? And this Amy now has all of the financial wisdom of a financial advisor and can put it in the context of her dreams and hopes. But her hopes and dreams are coming back to her from her future self. And this insight is actually now being built out, but it's something we came to in 2.5 hours. And we had the idea, we built it out, and the prototype was ready in less than 4. So we're able to compress something that would typically take weeks and weeks and weeks of time, sometimes 6 months or more, into a day. And that's one of the beauties of the AI technology, because it allowed my small team of 6 people to do the work of 40 or 50 in a very compressed time frame. That's not taking away work, that's creating new possibility.
With the rapid evolution of technology, what's your vision for the future of education and professional training in preparation for a job market dominated by AI? And how should educational institutions and individuals adapt to cultivate a workforce that can coexist with AI and maximize mutual benefits?
Yes. I think one of the biggest shifts we'll see in education is that it's going to be more like an apprenticeship. than we've seen in the past. We have an industrial model right now where you sit in a class, you're amongst 30 other students, and you're talked at for a series of hours. That doesn't benefit the teacher or the student. There are some professors who do just want to stand up there and talk, and they're happy with that. But most teachers are overburdened. They're under-resourced. Like if you take a look, especially at the primary education system of what we go through when we're young all the way through high school, those teachers, my mom was a teacher in that environment, and teachers are using their own money to buy resources for their students so they can participate and have an education. They're not making any money anyways. Like teachers are one of the most important roles we have in society, and we pay them almost nothing. We say they're important, but we tell them they're not. And I think that AI will provide some resources to teachers to be more available to their students. And I think it's going to come from two sides. One, we're going to make the teacher more capable at helping students in providing tailored education in the classroom. The other is this idea of the apprenticeship and self-driven education. As we get to a place where AI is getting better and better and better at synthesizing information, you can essentially query the world's greatest thinkers in any subjects based on what AI can do. And I also think that immersive education will play a role in this too. So when I talk about the apprenticeship, even Meta actually has this demo where you can learn how to play the drums while wearing the Oculus. And everything from like wrist positioning to timing to how you do certain things, you can get precise guidance in the minute on how to provide a creative and physical task. The same thing will be available to knowledge work and thinking. So as I'm thinking through something, as I'm working through something, I can get guidance from AI about how to do that. And I think that's going to be a very robust industry about how we look at education as an apprenticeship, individual one-to-one model with the greatest thinkers in the world, and then also being able to have that societal view of coming together as a class, being taught by a teacher and say, how do you take all this information and then put it together as a class? And that's why I think this idea of the creative generalist is going to be so powerful, because right now we're looking at that being an effective model for corporate collaboration. But that's precisely what we would be building at scale in our education system if we said, we're going to tailor our educational approach, but each student gets to kind of do it in their own way that is really powerful for them. They get to kind of look at the resources that AI makes available to them. They're building their own custom education while still sitting in a collective class, and then you get to work on things together. You're bringing a whole bunch of creative generalists together to create something and building something collectively. And I think that when we get to a point where that's built into our education system, the creative element of the human spirit is going to be completely uncontained. And I think that's going to be the moment when we move away from this anxiety and fear of being replaced and really forward towards this possibility of collective creation.
And when we talk about the future of organizations will be agent-driven. Essentially driven by bots that can spin up other bots to get actions done. But the real trifecta of the future of work is teams that are built between humans and AIs interacting together, and automation being a foundational layer underneath that. As a generalist, I've got skills that are enhanced by AI that can fit not just the specific job that I have, but also be lent to other departments based on a specific task or project that might come up.
Bom, se por um lado a inteligência artificial permite com que a gente elimine tarefas repetitivas ou substitua tarefas repetitivas, por outro, ela vai permitir que a gente possa utilizar mais nossas habilidades humanas, que nós possamos ser muito mais humanos. Afinal de contas, a era da inteligência artificial é a era onde robôs humanizados vão ocupar o espaço de seres humanos robotizados. Ou seja, por incrível que pareça e meio redundante, finalmente nós precisaremos ser seres humanos humanizados. Com a IA ocupando o espaço do nosso trabalho de tarefas repetitivas, burocráticas, até às vezes analíticas ou de raciocínio lógico, permitindo com que a gente possa ser mais estratégico, mais criativo e mais seres humanos e colocar isso que é insubstituível na gente a favor do nosso trabalho, unindo o que a IA tem de melhor e o que o ser humano tem de melhor para que juntos entreguemos coisas que a gente jamais conseguiria fazer sozinhos e que a inteligência artificial também não conseguiria fazer. O futuro do trabalho ainda está sendo construído e ele deve ser co-criado entre pessoas e empresas para mapear quais são as tarefas repetitivas onde uma inteligência artificial pode gerar produtividade e eficiência e assim analisar quais são as ocupações e funções que são mais suscetíveis a serem substituídos por uma inteligência artificial. Mapeado isso, identificar quais são as pessoas que devem passar por esse processo de reskilling e upskilling de forma mais urgente e quais são as novas posições que elas podem ocupar, de acordo com o seu perfil, com as suas habilidades e com o conhecimento que devem ser desenvolvidos. O momento não é de medo ou de adotar a inteligência artificial de qualquer forma na sua empresa. O momento é de você concentrar as suas energias e os seus recursos de forma inteligente para compreender como é que você pode utilizar a inteligência artificial para amplificar as pessoas, os seus negócios dentro da sua empresa.
Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. Cheers.